Who would you stand up for when the whole world looks away? That's the question I want you to keep in your mind until the very end of this story, because the answer might surprise you. And before we dive in, if you believe in courage, loyalty, and standing for what's right, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe, because stories like this one deserve to be remembered. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon in a small town square. The streets were filled with the lazy buzz of motorcycles echoing in the distance, the smell of fried food from a nearby diner, and the chatter of locals going about their day. But in the middle of it all, a scene was unfolding that made everyone's heart tighten with unease. At the corner near the old post office, two cops stood towering over a woman in a wheelchair. Her long blonde hair framed her face, her leather vest covered in patches told her story without a single word. She was a member of the Hells Angels. But today, she wasn't roaring down the highway with her crew. She was alone, wheels locked, being interrogated for nothing more than existing where someone thought she didn't belong. "Ma'am, we've told you before," one officer sneered, "this corner isn't for loitering. Don't think that jacket makes you untouchable." Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled on the arms of her chair. "I'm waiting for a friend. That's all. You don't have the right to treat me this way." The crowd nearby, customers leaving the diner, people passing through, watched but said nothing. They kept their heads down. After all, who would step into a fight between the police and a biker? That's when Daniel appeared. A single dad, a mechanic, just a regular guy who had stopped to grab some groceries on his way home. He wasn't a biker, he wasn't a fighter, and he certainly wasn't looking for trouble. But the sight of two men in uniform bearing down on a woman in a wheelchair twisted something deep inside him. He remembered his daughter's words just a week before, "Daddy, you always tell me to stand up for people who can't." So he did. "Excuse me," Daniel's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He walked right up, his jaw set, his eyes locked on the officers. "What exactly is this woman doing wrong?" The taller cop bristled. "Sir, this doesn't concern you." "Actually," Daniel said, stepping between the wheelchair and the men, "it does. You're harassing someone who can't even defend herself. And last I checked, sitting in a public place isn't a crime." Murmurs spread through the small crowd. The officers shifted, annoyed now that someone had broken the silence. The woman in the wheelchair looked up at him, her eyes wide with something between disbelief and gratitude. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. "Yes, I do," Daniel replied softly, so only she could hear. The cops, frustrated, spat a few more threats before storming off, muttering about keeping an eye on her. The crowd dispersed, tension dissolving into relief. But for Daniel, the story wasn't over. The woman introduced herself as Rachel. She had been with the Hells Angels for years, but a terrible accident had left her paralyzed from the waist down. Still, her brothers and sisters in the club never left her side. They made sure she still belonged, still rode along in her trike with the wind on her face. But today, she was alone, and vulnerable. Daniel wheeled her over to the diner and bought her a cup of coffee. They talked for an hour. About his daughter. About her accident. About loyalty. About being underestimated. About how cruel the world could be when it thought you were weak. She smiled faintly. "You didn't even know me. Why'd you stand up?" Daniel shrugged. "Because someone had to. And I'd want someone to do the same for my little girl one day." Rachel nodded, but her eyes held a weight that Daniel didn't yet understand. The next morning, Daniel's small mechanic shop was humming as usual when the sound hit him. A low rumble. Then louder. Then deafening. He stepped outside and froze. Down the main road, one after another, came motorcycles. Dozens. Then scores. Chrome glinting in the sunlight, leather vests marked with the skull and wings patch. The Hells Angels. Not 5, not 10, but hundreds, nearly 250 riders, engines roaring like thunder rolling across the earth. They pulled into the lot, filling every inch of space. Neighbors peered from windows, jaws dropping. Daniel's heart raced, unsure if he'd just made a mistake bigger than he could handle. Rachel rolled forward from the middle of the pack. She pointed to Daniel. "That's him." The leader of the chapter, a massive man with tattoos crawling up his arms, stepped off his bike. He walked straight up to Daniel, his face unreadable. The silence was heavy. Then the man extended his hand. "You stood up for one of ours when no one else did," he said in a gravelly voice. "That don't get forgotten." Daniel shook his hand, still stunned. From that day on, the angels treated Daniel like family. They stopped by his shop, brought him business, even helped fix up his home when storms tore it apart. But more than that, they showed his daughter what loyalty looked like. The men people feared most turned out to be the ones who proved that respect runs deeper than appearances. And Rachel, she became a regular at Daniel's shop too. Her trike was always polished, always ready to roll, and she always made sure to tell his daughter stories of the road, stories of resilience, stories of choosing to keep fighting no matter what. Looking back, Daniel often thought about that day at the corner. He hadn't planned to be a hero. He was just a dad trying to do the right thing. But sometimes, one small act of courage sends ripples you can't imagine. So I'll leave you with this: who would you stand up for when everyone else stays silent? Because the choice you make in that moment could change everything. If this story moved you, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and share it with someone who needs a reminder. Real strength is found in standing for others, even when you stand alone.